Phonics and reading in the early years foundation stage. The aim of this session is to gain an understanding of the development of early reading skills in the EYFS and Key Stage 1. This slideshow could be particularly useful for practitioners who are new to the EYFS or Key Stage 1 and 2 teachers teaching children who have gaps in their knowledge of the early reading skills. Let's have a look at some research. The Rose Report of 2006 emphasises the importance of the need for a systematic approach to teaching phonics for the vast majority of children, including those with English as an additional language. It also stresses the need for phonics to be taught within a literacy-rich environment where engaging activities are available. Children need to be offered an active multisensory approach that appeals to all. Phonics is an integral part of learning to read and write, and the teaching of phonics needs to be evidenced as early as nursery where sound identification is developed. So what does that look like in the early years? Let's take a look at the document itself. Starting at the age band 30 to 50 months, we can clearly see three strands that are directly linked to development of phonic knowledge: enjoying rhyming and rhythmic activities, showing awareness of rhyme and alliteration, and recognising rhythm in spoken words. And here in 40 to 6 month age band, we see the large proportion of the development of reading centres around phonics, hearing and saying the initial sounds in words, segmenting the sounds in words and blending them together, and knowing letters that represent some of them, linking sounds to letters, naming and sounding the letters of the alphabet, and beginning to read words and simple sentences. And within the early learning goal at the end of reception, children read and understand simple sentences. They use phonic knowledge to decode regular words and read them aloud accurately. Introducing the phonemes. The phonemes are taught in a particular order. The ones on the left in orange represent the ones from Phase 2, and the ones in purple on the right represent those within Phase 3. When teaching each new phoneme, the programme of Jolly Phonics is often used. Each phoneme has a song and action that supports the synthetic approach, which is widely accepted as the best practice to the majority of children. So why are they introduced in this order? From week 1, children begin to use the phonemes taught to begin to segment and blend. There are some examples of some words that can be produced from the first 6 sounds. Moving on to reading skills, let's look at some examples of what children will be expected to read by the end of reception. The dog is on the mat. In order to read a simple sentence like the one above, you need to acquire the following skills: recognition of the individual phonemes, segment and blend phonemes together, and read irregular words, commonly known as tricky words. Here they've been highlighted in red. A more advanced sentence: she has long red hair. And in order to read this sentence, children will need to be able to recognise the individual phonemes, digraphs and trigraphs, which are underlined, segment and blend sounds together, and again recognise the tricky words, here again highlighted in red. Looking at recognising individual phonemes. So these are taught on a daily basis, learning 4 each week. Amongst them, there'll be individual digraphs, and they also introduced later on will be trigraphs. So what do all these terms mean? We look at graphemes, phonemes, digraphs and trigraphs. So a grapheme, the letters that represent a phoneme. What is a phoneme? A phoneme is one grapheme that makes one sound. For example, s, a, t, p, I and n. What is a digraph? A digraph is 2 graphemes together that make one sound. So an e and an e together making e, an o and an together making o, a s and a h together making sh, or an and a g together making ng. And trigraphs is when 3 graphemes together make one sound. I, g and h together making the sound I, e, a and together making the sound ear, and a, I and together making the sound air. So moving on to segmenting. Segmenting describes the process of breaking down a word into separate phonemes. A child should be encouraged to point underneath for each phoneme. So looking at the word cat, they need to be able to identify each phoneme, k, a and t. And looking at a word like boat, they need to be able to identify the digraph. So be able to segment it into b, o, t. And the word shop, being able to again identify that digraph, this time at the beginning, and segment it into sh, o, p. And the last word, night, will identify that trigraph in the middle, so they can segment n, I, t. And moving on from segmenting to then be able to blend them together. So blending is the process of building the word after segmenting. After segmenting a word, a child should be encouraged to swoosh under the whole word from left to right. So in the example below, the child would press the red sound buttons to segment s, at, and then move their finger swiftly from left to right to join those words together, that process of blending. This could be modelled by an adult. Irregular and tricky words. As it suggests, they are tricky and they don't follow any rules. There's no easy way to learn them. In reception, we send home 4 at a time in a small bag to revise, and the first 4 tricky words are recognised, the next 4 are given, and there are 60 in total. Flashcards can be used to revise them as quick as they need to be recalled quickly, and they can also be taught as part of a game, such as word hunts, to support recognition and spelling. Let's have a look at Phase 3. Further digraphs and trigraphs are introduced towards the end of Phase 3, with some consonant digraphs ch, sh, th, and ng, and vowel digraphs a, e, o, u, r, or, ow, oi, and trigraphs I, ear, and air. When children start Phase 4, they'll know a grapheme for each of the 42 phonemes. They'll be able to blend phonemes to read CVC words and segment in order to spell them. Children will also have begun reading regular 2-syllable words and simple captions, as well as reading and spelling some tricky words. In Phase 4, no new graphemes are introduced. The main aim of this phase is to consolidate the child's knowledge and to help them read and spell words which have adjacent consonants such as trap, string, and milk. Children entering Phase 5 will already be able to read and spell with word adjacent consonants such as trap, string, and flask. They'll also be able to read and spell some polysyllabic words. In Phase 5, children will learn more graphemes and phonemes. For example, they already know A as in rain, but they'll now be introduced to A as in day and A as in make. Alternative pronunciations for graphemes will also be introduced, the E and A together in tea, head, and break. Let's have a look at those phonics sessions. So phonics sessions have 4-part structure. The first part, to revisit and review. So revisit and review phonemes and tricky words that have already been taught. In Part 2, to teach new phonemes, to make an introduction to a new phoneme each day. And the third part, practice, to identify phonemes, to practice segmenting and blending, and to write the corresponding grapheme. An application, to be able to apply by reading a sentence or caption or writing a dictated phrase or sentence. So what could this look like? Phonics sessions should take place daily using the 4-part structure. Consideration should be given as to when these sessions take place. We teach phonics between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock every day to ensure that children who arrive late at school are not further disadvantaged by missing these teaching sessions. So give that some thought. All children are introduced to Phase 2 in the first term. Once the single sounds have been taught and been confidently used by children, they're ready to start with Phase 3. At this point, the class could be split into 2 groups. Teaching in small groups gives opportunity to focus on children's individual needs and for the teacher to identify any misunderstandings. One group can revisit Phase 2 if necessary, and the other group could move on to Phase 3. Planning this way can also provide an opportunity for the teacher to focus on a formal approach in the classroom at the same time as the teaching assistant is outside of the classroom with a different group of children participating in phonics games, and this gives the opportunity for them to apply and consolidate what they have learnt. So over the duration of each day, a child could have 40 minutes exposure to phonics. So let's go back to that early learning goal. Reading is a life skill that is not intended to be isolated within a phonics session. The teaching of reading skills is intended to support independence in reading and writing and needs to be further supported in the wider learning environment. So we need to think about enabling environments. Areas where children can independently practice reading skills, explore new ideas and make mistakes. Places where they can handle books and create their own. Listen to rhymes and stories. Retell stories they've heard in class by using small world toys and puppets. Plans for adult-led and independent activities that are linked to the week's topic. and essentially sending home reading books on a regular basis that are appropriate to the stage of reading to practice reading skills and develop confidence. So you can now see how a systematic approach to teaching phonics is essential to developing early reading skills that will provide a foundation towards independence and reading for life.